Bill Maher thought he could throw in a quiet dig and move along, but Jasmine Crockett's calm and cutting response flipped the entire room and the internet with force. The dressing room at CBS Television City in Los Angeles felt cold, not in temperature, but in mood. It was the kind of place so polished and used that it forgot real people waited there. Jasmine Crockett sat quietly, her elbows resting on the chair arm, her phone screen slowly fading in her hand. An assistant had just stepped out, gently reminding her she had 10 minutes before appearing on Real Time with Bill Maher. She took a breath, not to calm nerves. She had been on national TV before, but this time felt different. Maybe it was the call she got 2 days ago from her communications director, who said the invite felt a little too pointed. They're calling it a conversation about polarization and civility, the director had warned. But if Maher goes the way I think he will, they may be trying to corner you. Be ready. Jasmine had not responded right away. She was used to being on panels that began with politeness and ended with dismissive smiles. That was nothing new. What was new was the silence when she arrived. No one offered her water. No one introduced her to the other guest. Voices echoed faintly in the hallway, laughs that stopped when she entered the green room. She did not need confirmation. She already had it. Her assistant, Reese, leaned through the door. 2 minutes. Jasmine stood up, adjusted her light blue blazer, simple, sleek, no flair, and glanced at her reflection. No cracks. No room for any. Not here. As they made their way to the stage, she passed the familiar wall of black and white photos, the so-called icons. Men in suits, men with takes, men who never had to monitor their tone to avoid being called angry on cable news. When she reached the set, she offered Maher a polite smile. He gave her a slight nod and motioned toward her seat, as if holding in a joke meant only for him. The lights brightened. The applause sign blinked. The theme music played and they were live. Maher leaned in, wearing a half smile. Our next guest is a rising Democratic Congresswoman from Texas. She's young, sharp, and maybe the party's future if emotion does not get in the way. The crowd gave a small laugh. Jasmine tilted her head slightly, not puzzled, but measuring. She crossed her legs, hands neatly folded. Glad to be here, she said, voice even. Maher forced a grin. Let's start easy. Why do so many progressives today feel the need to make everything about morality? She paused, blinking slowly, nodding faintly like she had seen the setup coming. But what followed wasn't anger, it was cooler, sharper, far more threatening to anyone who thought they could manage her. Jasmine leaned in a bit, not enough to seem aggressive, just enough to claim space. Her voice stayed soft. Moralizing? You mean speaking up for people who rarely get heard? Maher smirked. Sure, but don't you think sometimes the passion gets in the way of actual governance? There's too much yelling, enough doing. Feels like everyone wants to trend online, not make policy. A few more chuckles from the crowd, that uncertain kind of laugh, where no one knows if it's meant to be funny or insulting. Jasmine did not smile. I understand, she said smoothly. Young people, especially young women, especially young black women, get called emotional for caring deeply or angry for being direct. Meanwhile, someone else can blow up, curse on TV, and it is called passion. Funny, right? Maher shifted slightly. You're making this about identity. I'm talking about method. People want solutions, not speeches. And I am saying, Jasmine responded, you cannot remove identity from how people respond. When someone has watched their neighborhood get neglected, underfunded, and blamed for issues they didn't cause, how do you expect them to sound when they finally have a voice? Soft? The tension rose. The room got quiet, not uncomfortable, but expectant. Maher raised an eyebrow. But isn't that the problem? The mic turns into a weapon instead of a tool. Every moment becomes a comeback. Feels like Congress is a stage now. Jasmine laughed, not because it was funny, but because the irony was too good. You know what's wild? She said. It has always been a stage. You just did not notice when the same people wrote every line. Now that someone new is reading from the script, suddenly, it's called performative. Someone in the crowd whispered, whoa. Others began to nod. The camera stayed on Maher's face. He reached for his water. Okay, so let us take emotion out of the picture. When it comes to policy, What is actually getting done? That depends, Jasmine replied. Do you mean what is being put forward, or what is constantly being stopped? He tilted his head. Explain. She did. Take voting rights. I helped write language meant to make voting easier for workers, more polling locations, better mail-in access, and support for people with disabilities. That is not about feelings. That is about structure. But every time we bring it up, someone calls it overreaching. So I ask, who is really slowing progress down? Maher shrugged. Maybe it is just not that black and white. No, she replied simply. It is that clear. The complicated part is trying to defend systems that benefit a few while acting like they serve everyone. People in the audience began to murmur. This was not the usual back and forth. No jokes, no forced laughter, just two people digging into something deeper, and only one of them seemed comfortable there. Maher crossed one leg, forced a thin smile. Sounds like a solid sound bite. Jasmine did not blink. Maybe, or maybe it just sounds different because I did not have to raise my voice to make the point. But Maher was not finished, and Jasmine could feel it. What followed was not a question. It was a move. He leaned back, the smile fading into something colder, more measured. He tapped the armrest once, then again. Well, he said slowly, you speak a lot about how tough it is for women like you. But isn't part of leadership being open to criticism without calling it oppression? That line landed hard. Not because it was loud or witty, but because it carried that quiet challenge. You are not allowed to call this what it is. Jasmine did not respond right away. She looked at him, really looked not like she was debating, but like she saw a man asking a question he thought he already had the answer to. Then she turned a bit toward the crowd. Not in a big way, just enough to bring them into it. She did not smile. She did not raise her voice. She barely blinked more than normal, but her tone shifted. Slower, sharper. Let me ask you something, she said softly. If I sit here and explain how certain systems push people aside, and your first reaction is that I am playing victim, what does that say about the way you listen? Silence. Real silence. No coughs. No murmurs. No laughs. She continued. I am not oppressed because someone disagrees with me. I am pointing to a pattern. And the moment I name that pattern, the focus shifts to whether I am too sensitive, not whether the pattern exists. That is not real discussion. That is avoiding the issue. The camera cut to Maher. His face shifted not much, just a flicker, but enough to show that moment of realization. He might not be leading the conversation anymore. Jasmine stayed composed. And let us be honest, she went on. You have made a name saying what others avoid. You are known for going against the mainstream. But when a black woman does the same thing, when she calls you out directly, you do not call it bold. You call it emotional. A woman in the crowd clapped. Then another. Soon, half the room joined in. Maher raised his hand, trying to quiet them down with a smirk that did not quite stick. All right, let us keep it civil. Jasmine turned back to him, calm as before. And being civil, she said. I am just not being small. That line cut through the air. It did not need to be fiery. Its weight came from the truth inside it. Years of lived restraint packed into one sentence. It was not a comeback. It was a correction. A clear boundary, just drawn. Even Maher could not spin it for a moment. He leaned back and exhaled, part sigh, part concession. He tried to move on, reaching for his cards, but his hands moved just a bit quicker now. His rhythm had slipped, and the crowd sensed it. Not because they were all siding with Jasmine, but because, for once, the story on stage was not being told through sarcasm or spectacle. It was two different worlds meeting, and the quieter one was holding ground. Jasmine did not go further. She did not have to. She leaned back, straightened her blazer slightly, and waited for the next question. But the real shift did not come from her words. It came after, when the show wrapped and the reactions began. The credits had barely finished when Reese ran into the dressing room, eyes wide, Jasmine's phone in hand. You are trending. Jasmine raised one eyebrow. She unclipped her mic. Already? Number 2 on X and climbing. She took the phone from him. Notifications were pouring in. Some were screenshots. Others were short clips, just 15 seconds long, highlighting that one line. I am not being small. They played on repeat, turned into GIFs, memes backed by intense music, with bold white text underneath. Say that again. She exhaled through her nose. They are going to spin this. They already are, Reese replied. But you should read the comments. People are really responding. And it is not just political Twitter, it is everyone. The producers did not come back to say goodbye. No handshake after the show. No thank you message. Just the same assistant with the short "You are clear" before leaving. That was fine. Jasmine was not expecting a recap. On the ride back to the hotel, her inbox filled with messages from staff, journalists, and friends in Dallas. Some were proud, some amazed, others just texted, "Damn." Her mother wrote, "You were raised right. That man thought he knew you, he didn't." But it wasn't just praise buzzing. By the time she reached the hotel elevator, a headline had already gone live. Congresswoman Crockett lashes out at Bill Maher in on-air clash. She stared at the screen, shook her head, and handed the phone back to Reese. Lashes out, she repeated. Anytime a woman sets a boundary, they call it aggression. Reese stayed quiet, pressed the elevator button, eyes lowered. Upstairs, Jasmine finally slipped off her heels. The quiet hotel room felt heavy, but familiar. She turned on the muted news. Her own face appeared on the screen, talking with no sound. A panel of commentators debated. Did she go too far? One claimed, "This is why Democrats struggle. They push people away with tone." Another replied, "She never raised her voice. She was precise." Jasmine did not watch long. She sat down, rubbed her foot, and reached for the remote. But just before she turned the TV off, her phone buzzed again. This time a call. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. Area code. She let it ring twice, then answered. "This is Jasmine." Calm, composed male voice. "Congresswoman Crockett, this is Ed Ramos from CNN. We would like to invite you on tomorrow morning, just to follow up on your appearance." She waited a beat. "My team will follow up with you," she said. "Thank you." After she ended the call, Reese asked, "Do you want me to say no?" Jasmine leaned back in her chair, looking at the dark skyline outside. "Tell them we will think about it," she replied. Because that was the truth. She didn't feel the need to jump into another mic, another headline, another table of people ready to misread her on purpose. She wasn't avoiding it. She just didn't want to be a trending moment. Not when she was building something real. Online, people were quoting her not with hashtags or chants, but with something more honest. Some posted about their workplaces, how they were told to smile more, speak less, take nothing to heart. Others wrote about raising daughters who speak with confidence. This had moved past politics. It had become personal. Jasmine scrolled through more posts, most from unknown users, some with names. One stood out. A selfie of a high school girl from Columbus, Ohio holding a sticky note with Jasmine's words, "I am not being small," written in bold Sharpie. But the wave forming around her was not just made of applause. By morning, the backlash came louder than ever. By 7 o'clock a.m., headlines had multiplied. Half of them included the word, clapback, fiery exchange, Congresswoman destroys Maher. The same old digital exaggeration, but underneath it all was something more important, a divide. Cable news picked it up. Morning radio joined in. Podcasts dropped emergency episodes. Some called her bold. Others called her polarizing. One conservative host called her an activist in a suit, as if that were an insult. Back in Dallas, Jasmine sat at her kitchen counter. The smell of warmed-up coffee filled the room. The news hummed quietly in the background. She had not slept much, not from worry, but because she already knew what the next 2 days would bring. Reese sat across from her, eyes on his laptop. "There are at least 20 new interview requests," he said. NPR, MSNBC, a few independent shows, even that guy from The Viewpoint. "Skip him," she replied. "Already did." She looked out the window. The sun was finally pushing through the clouds, light landing gently on rooftops. It was quiet. Here, truly quiet. "Do they want to talk policy?" she asked. Reese paused. "Mostly, they want a reaction." "Of course they do," she muttered. It wasn't that Jasmine did not understand the media. She understood it all too well. What bothered her was how one moment after so many interruptions, dodges, and quiet dismissals was now reduced to a viral soundbite. A man from the Capitol had called her office. Later that day, someone from the Capitol called her office. He said he respected what she said, but warned her that the media rarely gives grace in these moments. In other words, you made them uncomfortable, don't do that again. But Jasmine was not shaken. She had walked into that studio already aware of the risks. What surprised her was the way some of her own peers reacted. An older congressman, someone she used to respect, posted a tweet about professionalism and unity. He did not mention her name, but everyone knew who it was aimed at. A few centrist commentators asked for more balance from both sides, as if calmly telling the truth was somehow the same as being dismissive on live television. Jasmine did not respond. No tweets, no videos, no live streams. She stayed quiet on purpose. She met with her staff, made some calls to trusted grassroots leaders, spoke to a high school class in Garland over Zoom. She thanked a girl who told her, "I felt seen." That part never made the headlines. Nobody mentioned the control it took not to yell, not to interrupt, to sit there calmly and still push back. Most people do not realize how much strength it takes not to react. Even so, it bothered her how quickly her words were reduced to a meme, a clapback, instead of what they really were, a clear act of self-respect. Later that night, Jasmine sat at her desk alone. The light from her laptop reflected on her face. Emails, talking points, interview prep, it could all wait. She opened her journal, a black leather notebook with worn edges, and wrote 5 words, not loud, just clear enough. Then she shut the book. She was not chasing camera time. She was not looking for applause. But she was not about to sit back quietly while others decided how she should show up. That decision, the boundary she had set, would follow her long after the trending topics disappeared. A week went by. The internet moved on to something else. A celebrity breakup. A leaked video. Another political mess. This one in Ohio. Clips of Jasmine still popped up now and then, usually with captions like, "This is how you handle it." But the attention had faded, and Jasmine was fine with that. She had never wanted noise. What stayed with her were the quiet conversations that followed. The real ones. Like the woman in her district, mid-50s, worked admin at a public school, who approached Jasmine after a town hall in Mesquite. She leaned in and whispered, "I have been talked over in meetings for years." She smiled, but looked a little sad. "You said what I never could." Then she added, "I just wish I had said it sooner." Or the retired pastor from Longview who left a voicemail at her office. "I did not agree with you," he said, "but I respected how you handled yourself." That's how grown people should speak. Keep being direct. It was these moments, those quiet, honest responses, that grounded Jasmine more than any headline ever could. But they also reminded her why. What happened on that stage mattered. It was never about landing a hit. It was not about scoring points. It was about setting a tone. There is pressure that comes with her role, not just as a politician, but as a black woman, in spaces where decisions are made before she even speaks, and judged harder after she does. People like to say, stick to policy. But when who you are is treated like a problem, being neutral is not something you always get to choose. She thought about that while speaking to interns visiting from smaller colleges across Texas. They sat around a long table, notebooks ready, eyes locked on her. One of them, a young man from Lubbock, asked, "How do you know when to speak and when to stay quiet?" Jasmine leaned back. "You do not wait until it feels safe," she said. "You speak when staying quiet feels heavier than the risk." They wrote that down. Another intern asked, "How do you stay calm when people talk down to you?" She smiled. "I do get angry," she said, "but I learned anger does not have to be loud to be real. You do not need volume to have impact." That was not something she learned from a book. That was learned in rooms where her voice was examined more than her thoughts, in moments when she wanted to yell, but chose not to. Not because she was scared, but because she understood the power of calm. After the meeting, one intern stayed behind a girl, nervous hands, fidgeting. "I want to run for office someday," she said, "but I don't think people will take me seriously. I talk fast. I get emotional. People say I are too much." Jasmine looked at her, calm and kind. "Keep caring," she said. "That is the part they are afraid of." They stood in a brief Quiet pause. The girl smiled, then walked out, still writing in her notebook. Jasmine stood by the window after they left, watching cars crawl through the streets below. Outside felt loud, but inside, in that moment, everything felt certain. She knew her words from Maher's show had traveled far. But what mattered more was where they settled. That line, "I am not being small," was never meant to just go viral. It was a reminder that real strength does not need to shout, that clear words carry power, that not shrinking is a form of standing tall. Still, even with all of that, the story was not over. Not until the people watching understood what it could mean for them. There is a kind of silence that follows you after a public moment. Not peace, not quiet, but the kind that asks what comes next. For Jasmine, that question did not bring fear. It brought responsibility, because the truth is, most people will never go live on national television. They will not sit across from a talk show host while millions watch. They will not be quoted, misquoted, or turned into a viral trend, but they will sit in rooms where their words are dismissed, where their ability is questioned as soon as they speak, where someone smiles at them while slowly pushing them to the side. That is where this story lives now, not in the clip, but in the response it sparked. A young teacher in Tulsa wrote Jasmine a letter by hand. She said she showed the clip to her students not for the politics, but for the way Jasmine held herself. "We talk about bullying," the teacher wrote, "but we rarely show what it looks like to stand firm without lashing out." A man in his 60s from rural Oregon also wrote. He said he didn't agree with her on much, but he remembered her calm. "I watched someone take a hit," he said, "and not hit back. That stayed with me." That was the legacy of the moment. Not that Jasmine Crockett won a debate, but that she gave people something they hadn't realized they were missing: permission to speak with strength without cruelty, to hold their space without apology, to correct someone without revenge. In a world that rewards loud comebacks and viral takedowns, that kind of presence is rare and powerful. And that was the deeper message. You do not have to yell to be taken seriously. You do not have to shrink to be accepted. And you do not owe anyone a softer version of yourself just to make them feel more at ease. When Jasmine walked into that studio, she went in to talk about policy. She did not plan to make headlines, but what she left with was something more lasting. A guide for every woman told she is too intense. For every young person told they are being naive. For every black voice told to lower their tone when all they did was speak clearly. This story is a reminder: you do not need permission to be whole. You do not need approval to be right. And you do not need to change your tone just to belong in someone else's version of respectable. So if you're watching this and wondering what it has to do with you, ask yourself, where have you made yourself smaller just to stay safe in a room? Where have you backed off? Not because you were wrong, but because you were scared of being labeled. And more importantly, what would happen if you stopped doing that? What if, next time someone tried to judge your worth based on how you speak, you looked them in the eye and said, "I am not being small"? Because once you say that, everything changes. People will feel it. Some will admire it, some will not, but none of them will forget it, and neither will you. If this story meant something to you, pass it along. Send it to someone who might need this reminder. Say the words out loud if you have to, and subscribe, because here, we share stories that do more than inform. They reflect something lived, something real, the kind of truth you do not need to shout to believe in. Your voice matters exactly as it is.